Hey, good morning. It's Grant Gillard, pastor at the New Horizon Presbyterian Church in Odessa, Missouri. I'm broadcasting this morning from my basement. Now, when the realtor showed us this house, this was actually called the mechanical room. By any other name, it's still the basement. I'm down here because I just fixed my water heater. Ta-da! It's interesting, in the 33 plus years that Nancy and I have been married, the number one response, communication between the two of us, is, I love you. The second most common response, mostly coming from Nancy, is, do you know what you're doing? My most common response is, of course. See, I grew up in a home where if there's a leaky faucet, my dad would take my brother and he would go down the basement and we'd get a couple of pipe wrenches. There's always a coffee can full of those little round washers. And he would say, now go over here, and one of us got to turn the water off to the whole house. Most people don't know where that is. And so if a faucet breaks and it's spewing water all over the house, they don't know where that turn off is. My brother and I knew this stuff early on. So we'd go upstairs with my dad. Now with the water off, we would take that faucet apart and put that washer on and put it back together. Then we'd run down the basement, turn the water on. Ta-da! We got it fixed. My wife grew up in a house, and I don't mean to be disrespectful or negative, but if there was a leaky faucet, they called somebody. In my house, my dad rotated his own tires and taught us that there is a system of taking the lug nuts off. You don't just go around the circle. It alternates. And so we learned how to do that. We learned how to get the jack out of the trunk. We learned basically how to change a flat tire. In my wife's family, when you needed something like that done, you called AAA. My brother and I knew how to thread pipe for gas lines. We knew how to plumb sand points. There's a lot of things that we learned just because my dad took that time. As did my grandfather, who taught us how to trap pocket gophers. As did my uncle, who taught us how to put fencing up. And of course, there's just so many things that we learned, skills that don't come into my life every day, but they're things that we learned. So, our water heater, electric water heater, was acting up recently. It was tripping the circuit breaker. What's the problem here? So, I don't know. You go to Google and it says you probably got some corroded elements, heating elements, inside your electric hot water heater, and that is causing a short. That causes the circuit breaker to pop, and even when you turn it back on, it repeats itself. So I told Nancy, here's the problem. Then I went to YouTube. They'll tell you how to change out the elements, and it's really easy. First thing, turn the power off. Now, some people don't realize that either, but you flip the circuit breaker. How do you know what the circuit breaker is? Mine are labeled. That was something else we learned in my house growing up. We had fuse boxes, and oftentimes we would blow a fuse, but there were labels on those fuses as to which fuses ran which appliances. So it's really simple, and I've exposed my water heater here. Down here, disconnect 2 wires. Up here, disconnect 2 wires. And then, of course, I had to do a little shopping because I don't normally have an 1.5 inch socket, nor do I have this breaker bar for 1/2 inch. I got a 3/8, I got a 1/4 inch. So I had to buy these little extra expense, and I bought new elements, put them in. Well, they weren't working very good. So what I had to do then was get one of these little gizmos. This tells me if I've got electricity going through the system. And because we weren't getting hot water, this little thing said, you don't. So I drained the tank again. Again, all this is on YouTube. And discovered this was my element. And it's like it burned off inside. And I thought, man, that's unusual. Pretty dangerous too. So I thought, something's up. So what do? I go buy another element just like it. Now, what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over, expecting a different result. Well, this one didn't burn off, but it burned out real quick. So something was amiss. I made some phone calls because I'm ready to get some professional help. I made some phone calls, and as I described my situation, most of these plumbers said to me, hey, sounds like you got it under control, but there's something else, just something else. And there's that one little thing. And I thought of the movie Apollo 13. Tom Hanks, Kevin Bacon, and that other guy. They're lost up in space trying to get back to home. Meanwhile, NASA is trying to assemble some way to keep them alive. And they've got duct tape, air filters, and this flexible tubing. And when it doesn't work, they tear it all apart, and they try and rebuild it a little different way. When that doesn't work out, they try and rebuild it a different way. They're trying to do something. So I took everything apart, put it all back together, couldn't figure it out. Now, little did I know that I had burned out this seemingly good-looking, fully functional heating element. So that made me go to the store and buy a multimeter. And again, YouTube tells you how to work these things. So, as I hooked it up to this perfectly good filter or good heater, no sound. This was not working. So, Nancy, in her patience, actually her lack of patience. She's normally a woman of immeasurable patience. But now they were measurable. She says, call somebody. Get somebody out here. We need hot water. So yesterday morning, put in some calls to some plumbers. Nobody called me back. When she came home from Clinton at dinner time, she said, so, hot water? I said, no. I said, I called these people. Nobody called me back. So she made a call to somebody who I had called, and she said, you didn't even call us back. What's going on? Well, she said after a little while, how old is that water heater? I said, well, it's got to be pretty old because I shop vac after I drained it before I put these elements in. I shop vac a lot of sediment out of the bottom of this electric water heater. It's probably pretty old. She says, time to buy a new one. So we went online. We shopped Home Depot. We shopped at Lowe's, found the best bargain at Home Depot. Drove to Lee Summit, about 30 minutes away. We found a water heater. And there's a little sign that says, same day installation. And Nancy says, great. We'll have them deliver it for free. We'll have them install it for free. Because isn't that what that sign means? So I went up to the service desk, started asking questions. They go, no, you're in Holden. There's a delivery charge. And no, installation is not free. In fact, as we have these subcontractors, you'll end up probably paying about as much as a water heater. And we're looking at water heaters in the neighborhood of $400 to $500. So we figure, okay, let's get hold of another plumber. We'll start again fresh in the morning, but we found a water heater we like. And I went back there and clicked. I took a picture of it, so in the event we needed to do this, they would know what size, what height, how we connected up to the water here in the house. And I took some pictures. As I was taking the picture, on the side of the box of the water heater, it says, comes with two 4,500 watt heating elements. 4,500 watt heating elements. That number was not lost on me because the heating elements I was buying were 3,500 watt, which were the same wattage that I was pulling out that were all corroded. And I've had trouble putting all this together. We walk out of Home Depot. Nancy's hungry. She's a little bit irritated. And so she says, take me to Five Guys. I need a hamburger. Okay. really just like God had laid his hand on my shoulder right there in the parking lot of Home Depot. I kid you not. And it's like God said, go back in there. It's a 30-minute drive if you have to come back tomorrow. You're here. Go back in there and purchase the 4,500 watt heating elements. So I told Nancy, why don't you go to the car and call ahead and get your hamburger ordered at Five Guys, because Five Guys is literally right up the street. I went back in there and I bought a 4,500 watt heating element. So we get home, there's no hot water. I drain the tank enough to screw this one in, and I'm ready to try anything. Nancy is irritated. She says, we're calling the plumber tomorrow and we're telling them they need to come today because we need hot water. Just all I said is, okay. You know, there's kind of an old saying that goes something like, when mother isn't happy, nobody's happy. Nancy wasn't happy. And I'm just trying to fly below the radar. So I put this element in, turn the thermostat all the way down. I go over to the fuse box, or the circuit breaker box, flip that switch. And after a while, I can begin to feel the hot water pipe up at the top. And there's some heat being generated. I inch up the thermostat a little bit more, and a little bit more after a while, and a little bit more. I didn't want to put all that juice going in there at once. And it worked. This morning, we had hot water. And I just think how funny it was that I kind of gave up fixing it myself. I acquiesced to Nancy's demand that we go and buy a new one, which didn't happen, but it put us in place in Home Depot, and I decided it would be, using technology. I'll take a picture of this box so that I got some idea to give the plumber some idea of what we're looking at or looking for so they can bring the appropriate tools to get it hooked up. And stopping just that brief second right in the middle of the parking lot, and it's not like it's an audible voice. It's kind of like that gut intuition that says, you're here. They have larger, higher capacity heating elements right inside that door at Home Depot. Do you want to make a return trip tomorrow? Are you ready to give this a shot? Where is your step of faith in this matter? Now, this isn't a leap of faith. It's just a small step because, in today's economy, you buy something, doesn't work out, got your sales receipt, you can take it back. So it really wasn't faith, it was pragmatics. So, having bought that element, having plugged it in, it worked. I don't know how it works. All I know is Nancy's a little tentative when I got a project now, and she says, do you know what you're doing? Because probably I'm going to have to ask or answer it honestly and say, I think so, but maybe not, but we can always call somebody. I think she's going to jump to, let's call somebody. But that's how she grew up. It's different than the way I grew up. Sometimes we just get a little too set in our history and our frugality. Of course, I think that was one of the reasons, a lot of the reasons my dad fixed stuff is it was just so much easier than calling somebody else. Hey, Sunday, we are meeting, and again, we're going to be meeting in the parking lot. One of the passages we're looking at is 1 Peter chapter 3, beginning at verse 13. And it's about suffering. Now, we're in this pandemic, and a lot of us, myself included, I would not say are suffering, but I'm being horribly inconvenienced. But this isn't about suffering from the standpoint of any kind of pandemic or inequity. It's about doing good and suffering from doing that good. 1 Peter 3, verse 13. Who is going to harm you if you are eager to do good? But even if you should suffer for what is right, you are blessed. Do not fear what they fear, do not be frightened, but in your hearts set apart Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give a reason for the hope that you have, but do this with gentleness and respect, keeping a clear conscience, so that those who speak maliciously against your good behavior in Christ may be ashamed of their slander. It is better, if it is God's will, to suffer for doing good than doing evil. For Christ died for sins once and for all, the righteous for the unrighteous, to bring you to God. He was put to death in the body, but made alive by the Spirit, through whom also he went and preached to the spirits in prison, who disobeyed long ago when God waited patiently in the days of Noah while the ark was being built. In it, only a few people, 8 in all, were saved through water, and this water symbolizes baptism, that now saves you also, not the removal of dirt from the body, but the pledge of a good conscience toward God. It saves you by the resurrection of Jesus Christ, who has gone into heaven and is at God's right hand with angels, authorities, and powers in submission to him. And that's just a passage of pure grace. I live in a household that is oftentimes a little impatient with my, yeah, I know what I'm doing. But the good news, this is also a household of forgiveness, because now all has been set right with the world. That is, the world that needs hot water. I'm Grant Gillard. If you want to join us at 10:15 at New Horizon Presbyterian Church, the south side of Odessa, Missouri, we have a parking lot, worship service. We're working the way to adapt, to transition into what we hope is an in-person worship service in the sanctuary. The time will tell. There's still a lot of moving parts to this thing. In the meantime, God bless. Hope to see you Sunday.